Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for people to join and to wait for everyone to get into the room. And we're going to start in the next 2 minutes. Yes, thank you for those who attended the previous webinar with Tish. And now we're looking forward to listening to Claudio. And we're just going to give people the chance to get into the room. So it's time for you maybe to go quickly get a coffee or something to drink to be ready for the next 50 minutes. And just enjoy and be empowered and learn new skills that you can go and apply in your life. I'm looking forward to sharing the webinar this morning with you all with Claudio. But before I introduce him, maybe just if you're in the chat room, just tell us where you're from, who's in the room, who's listening. It just would be great to see. Ciao, Kobus. Yes, nice to see you all the way from the UK, my friend. Nice to see you, Giancarlo. Yes, nice to see you are here as well. I really appreciate your support. And then I see a few people are also typing. And with a new haircut, I'm looking forward to seeing that, Giancarlo. And Krupa, hi, Kobus and Claudio. Yes, Phoenix says, go, Claudio. Claudia, people are rooting for you. You know, I hope you are going to blow them out of their shocks, you know, like a real warrior will do. So 1 minute to go, 1 minute to go. So I'm just giving people the chance to join. Sonia, morning, Sonia from Durban. Wow, a powerful start to the week with the first seminar. On board for the new power session. Definitely. I think this is going to be more than powerful. This is going to really take it to the next level. This is what this week is about. It's time for us to raise our standard, and looking forward to sharing the screen with all of you. Okay, so just to quickly look at who's still joining. I see a few of you still joining. Anyone in the chat box that wants to introduce yourself, where you're from, don't be shy. You know, use this moment to introduce yourself and to people that are in the group and that are you looking forward to this morning session. Okay, Claudia, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so everyone in this room, this is Kobus, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to say thank you for being here in this room, and it's a great honor and privilege to be in this room today with Claudio. Now, Claudio is a leadership and mental toughness coach from the Warrior Training Center in Cape Town. And, I believe he's going to introduce himself to you all, but I'm so grateful for having Claudio part of my community and tribe. And I met him about a year ago, and he came and became part of our family. And I'm looking for the journey with him together going into the future. Now, Claudia has prepared an amazing talk for all of you today, and I'm not going to give it away. I think there's something special, and you need to stay tuned to see what he's going to talk about. But before we start, let me just quickly play his intro for you, and then I'm going to give it over to Claudia. So I'm just going to get to play, and everyone enjoy. Okay, everyone, Claudio, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kobus, for that awesome welcome. Can you see my presentation?
No, not yet. Just move to your presentation. Open up your PowerPoint.
Okay.
We can see your screen, but we can't see the present. No, not that one. You just need to move to go to your PowerPoint, your PowerPoint.
All right. There we go. See it now?
At the bottom, yeah.
Can you-
Okay, and slaughter. Yes, David, perfect. Floor is yours.
Right. Welcome, everybody. I'm really looking forward to this session with you all. When Kobus invited me, I was more than happy, and I didn't need to hesitate to say no. So I'm also a student with the FIT, and excited to be part of this and be part of the tribe. Before I dive into mental toughness, sharing the views, I'd like to also just share a bit about the Warrior Training Center, as well as share a little bit about myself, the realizations that I've had in terms of limiting beliefs. The Warrior Training Center focuses on leadership and mental toughness. Underpinning this is the warrior mindset, which we'll be diving into. The coaching tools that I use is Krav Maga. I'm a qualified Krav Maga instructor, having qualified under Professor Itai Gill. Those who watch Sky may be familiar with the Special Forces series. He was the one who represented Israel. And I have a club in Cape Town where we also train. Firewalking, as I mentioned, I've completed the FIT, highly recommended course with Africa's only master firewalker, and also glass walking, walking broken glass, but also other activities, board breaking and so forth. In terms of leadership, finding how you're wired, I'm also a facilitator with Lemon, which you may be familiar with, Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and so forth. This is along those lines, but it's it's an acronym: Luminary, Entrepreneur, Manager, Organizer, Networker. And all of us are wired in a certain way. We have a primary slice and a secondary. They may be quite similar and it may change, but the first step is to determine the who are you of leadership. And it can be a continuous journey. This is important because the wording we use is linked to our wiring. And when we communicate with other people, they may be wired differently. So once you start having an awareness of this, it makes life a lot easier. As you may be familiar with Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, and this certainly helps in that regard. A little bit about my story, in case you are not familiar with it. I started my career in 1995, 2015 in the military, 10 years as full-time, and thereafter as a reservist, and I was also the England chairman for South African military veterans. But during this period, I also, as a reservist and military veteran affairs, I reskilled and I entered into the corporate world, where I was specialist banker and also in the maritime industry, where I worked in London, Milan, also New York, China, Spain, and France. But it was during this period where I was working with the Investec Bank in London, and they sponsored a TV show called School of Hard Knocks. You could find it on YouTube, where effectively it's 30 people who are really on the other side of the railway track, so to speak, down and out and so forth. And they take them through a rigorous rugby training program, starting with 5 a.m. sessions and so forth, where the rugby is actually a metaphor for life and for the discipline. So at the last episode, they play a rugby match. And remember, these 30 have never played rugby in their lives before. They play against a real rugby team. And I was asked to be a mentor for one of these, you can call him an actor now, but at that time, a participant. And I relished this opportunity. He had a problem with depression, spending some months in a home and so forth. But I saw this as an opportunity to share and to make a difference in someone's life. And you could say that pretty much after that, I started diving deeper and deeper in not only self-development, but also development of others until 2018. So that started effectively in 2012. 2018, I then took the plunge, so to speak, and put myself into the coaching full-time as a leadership mental toughness coach. And I'm currently the chairman for Coaches and Mentors of South Africa, Commensa for Western Cape. Moving on. So there were 2 experiences which made me sort of raise my awareness on smashing limiting beliefs. And they came about when I was 16 years old. I came back into the classroom, and on my desk, I found a note that the teacher had left that said, "Suggest you drop maths. Math is not for you." I was coasting along, and Admittedly, I hadn't really put the effort in, but I was being forced upon a belief from a teacher that, I'm not good enough. This is not for me. And half of me was accepting, but something didn't sit right. And said, I'm more than that. I can do this. I can smash it. I refused to accept this. I was 16. So I held on for dear life, scraping through. And I still had, even though I passed, I still had a point to prove to myself, but also to others. It was a limiting belief that I didn't want to accept. So the first opportunity I got, I went to university and enrolled in a BSc, Bachelor of Science, in pure mathematics and nautical science, just to smash the limiting belief. And I went extra lessons and so forth. After 3 years, I completed that, and that was a major tick box. That was when I was 16, and I made that promise to myself. Another incident that happened when I was 16 was, up until a point, growing up, I had these limiting beliefs related to physical, academic. I would regard myself as, if I had to describe myself, I would say I was scared, shy, timid, all those things. But there's something switched at this age, and I said, I can be more. And I took on a challenge. I said to myself, what is the toughest challenge out there? I was speaking to people older than me. They said, well, if you go to the army, and it wasn't compulsory when I left school, I had to volunteer. There's a course called Recce's, Special Force, that's the toughest. So I thought, all right, and what's the next? Now, parabats, so paratroopers. So that was where I set my mind. I was going to do that training. I had to prepare myself in a manner, my mind and body. So I started doing all these courses, parachuting courses and diving courses, scuba diving. And the one day I went for a scuba diving training with a sports organization in the Navy base, where we had to go in the chamber to 54 meters. And I saw these Navy divers training on the beach. They were carrying sandbags, carrying each other, dripped in sweat. That look of determination in their eye, that definitely caught my attention. And we finished our dive, we showered, finished up. 2 hours later, as I was leaving the base, I saw these same individuals who were drenched in sweat, carrying, now at this time, they were all showered in their white uniform, drinking tea, having biscuits and socializing. Wow. What struck me was they're pushing themselves physically, but yet they're still retaining their center, and you could say they're pushing themselves socially, maintaining the etiquette. And I thought to myself, I'm going to sign up for these guys. And that'll tick the box with that physical challenge that I needed to overcome. So straight after school, the first thing I did was I signed up for selection, which consisted of a 1 day of physical evolutions and then a 4-day, which at that time was 4 intense days where you hardly slept. It was equivalent to the US Navy SEAL whole week, and immense dropout rate. And I went through this process. Initially, there were 90 people, 90, and at the end of it, only 3 passed. And I was one of those 3. There was 97% dropout rate. One of the evolutions was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, drop us off in the middle of the bay, where there's the lighthouse, Roman Rock Lighthouse, the only lighthouse that's built actually on a rock in South Africa. And we had to swim back just with a Speedo, an aluminum stick on your arm, and there's great white sharks in the water also. And as they drop you off, if you just tread water, there's a current which sucks you in to the rock, and there's rusty spikes sticking out, so you will be impaled. So there's no option. You need to swim. There's no time to meditate upon it and think. No, you swim. You take action. And we took action. At that point, there were 4 of us left from the initial 90. And we swam back to, and you can see on the top diagram, it's about 1 kilometer. Doesn't sound a lot, but it is 2, 3 in the morning with choppy water. And there was a boat that picked us up just out of the harbor wall, and that was the evolution complete. So on completing the selection, I was on a major high, feeling that nothing could stop me. Felt invincible, and it was not meant to be. 11 days after that, I was in a horrific accident where they wanted to amputate my legs, and I was on a wheelchair, and then progressed to crutches. And the Navy then told me that I was no longer welcome in 2 years for now. And in 2 years' time, I need to go for another medical assessment, and if I passed that, I would need to redo the 1-day selection, not the entire 4. So it was kind of a conditional welcome back based on all these criteria. In the meantime, so what am I going to do in the meantime? So I had a meeting with the Navy, and they said we can go for officers training, which is not as physical, still physical, but I had already breached my bias. So I was out here, and I perceived the challenge from a physical point of view here for officers. So well, I can certainly do that, even with with my state. So I had my mental. So I went for the selection, and when I went there, it was a theory. I had to sit down. They asked me questions, and I went there almost like with a Zimmer frame. And they looked perturbed. The chief selector came up to me and said, "You do realize this is not a correspondence course. It is physical." And we had a laugh as I reassured him that this was temporary. Went into the training and completed the training. But the training itself was not without dramas, because I had the pins removed a little bit earlier. And so what would happen is 5 months earlier, and the legs would swell after intense training. So to hide that fact from my instructors, I would wear my socks, because we'd be training short pants. I'd wear my socks up to my knees, looking like Forrest Gump. And people would laugh at me, because no one wears socks like that, unless you're playing on a rugby field or soccer. But it was to hide this swelling legs. And so I got through the training, and at the end, I ended up being in the top 5% in terms of the results. So it certainly paid off pushing. In that regard, the whole time I was always assessing and checking that I'm okay. Deep down, I could feel that I was okay. So after rehabilitating, I continued. I said to myself, I still want to do a bit more of these challenges, and I've continued rehabilitating myself. I completed also military parachuting, amphibious training, and also had the privilege of training with NATO forces. The lessons I've learned there have certainly helped me to work with sportsmen, currently working with an undefeated African champion, but also with the military. And I believe that I've trained with my counterpart at the Warrior Training Centre, UK-based, Matthew Leach. We trained the biggest in hand-to-hand combat and self-defense, 600 people at once. These are the guys who trained. It was an enormous amount. Top right, that's training the paratroopers. Also mental toughness. This is typical standard Navy training, beach PT. So that is those two limiting beliefs which you could say set me off on this journey. But before I share with you on the talk of mental toughness, I'd like to make an agreement with you. Now, I've shared my truths with you. You understand my frame of reference. If yours differs, then perhaps there's no right or wrong. As long as your truth works for you, and as long as it truly does work for you. Because essentially what I'm talking about is sustainable mental toughness. And that is, if you think of the hunter-gatherer, where the man had to raise up 5 a.m. in the morning to go for the hunt, to feed his clan. That is what I'm talking about, because you'll need to do it again and again. Tomorrow, the next day, because there's no crops planted or anything like that. It's purely on the hunt. And if you're getting on in age, but you're the only man in the clan, guess what? You need to continue doing it. It's upon you to feed all the mouths. So you need to hope that somebody else has a son to lighten the load. But it's about that sustainable, getting up every morning and repeating the process, not about just bulldozing your way through things and resulting in burnout, which we'll get to. Now, underpinning all this is taking action and internalizing. Because we're in the age of wisdom, right? We've gone past the age of information, which I'll share more with you shortly. And the information is all out there. There are fantastic books out there also, highly recommended books. But with each book, there's a slightly different view, right? They may be similar and they may be completely different. The point is that all books offer something a little bit different. Or else there would be no point in reading more books. You just read one and you have all the knowledge. But a book is usually by somebody who's had a lesson he or she would like to share, an awakening, so it's an informed view. If you don't internalize your view and you just take whatever books, and have you read this, and you show how much you've read, but you haven't internalized, the risk is you'll change your view every time you read a different book. Internalization needs to take place, and you then accept your own truth. You formalize your own. So you write your own book according to how you're wired, your core values, your beliefs, and so forth. So I've shared with you these two limiting beliefs which I smashed through. And I'm grateful for these successes. But behind each of those successes was months and months of preparation. Some days it felt like it was 0%. I thought, making no progress. I keep a journal, but I didn't even have energy to write in the journal. I thought to myself, what must I write in the journal? Today, I achieved nothing. But still, it's that deliberate, purposeful practice, continuing. And also, there's a lot of failures behind it, because the failures lead to success. Success is on the other side of failure. And if you're an adherent of Stoic philosophy, you'll understand that the growth lies in the obstacles. This takes us forward. Now, I've used the term warrior, and you see the logo also represents a warrior with a man with the hand and a spear. And if I say to you warrior, what would come to mind? You're free to mention it in the comment block. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay. So the choice of warrior is not about a man going around with a spear and a shield stabbing people, not at all. It's twofold. One is the archetype, follow Carl Jung. It's about the warrior archetype, which is in all of us, not only man, woman, it's universal. It's the taking action. We all need to take action, but it's not only about being a warrior. It's also about the other archetypes as well, as we know, lover, magician, and king, and so forth, about being balanced. But certainly without action, the rest doesn't happen. And secondly, if we look at the timeline of civilization, the archetype, the warrior was kind of, defined in pre-industrial age, which I'll get into shortly, whereby you couldn't rely on technology you'd have to back yourself and rely yourself. And a classic example, which I like to use, is if you think about pre-days of modern warfare, going on the battlefield where you only have your spear and your shield, you need to rely on your mind and to be in control of your mind and body. You couldn't just press a button and a missile. No, you need to go onto the battlefield yourself. If you're not in control of your mind, then it's not going to happen. As Sun Tzu says, the warrior wins in his mind before he wins on the battlefield. And just to have a lighter take on this, you can have a read of that, and I'll give you a second. So I shared with you those two limiting beliefs, how it was just smashing through. And you could say, in Afrikaans, you say to vastbijt, or keep punching, or doing whatever it takes. When I was doing military parachute training, we were trained to have a certain attitude, which to an outsider can look as being macho or being aggressive, and I get that. However, if you're on a plane and you jump out and you're in a static line and your chute gets tangled in the plane and you're being dragged down the plane, imagine that. The people in the plane, right, the jump master is not going to order you to be pulled up because he feels sorry for you. No, you're a risk to them. So if he can't cut you loose, you'll need to take your own knife, cut yourself loose, and pull your reserve. There's a certain attitude you need for that. There's a warrior energy. If you can't tap into that, you're literally, dead meat. So that's what I'm talking about. But however, having said that, I came to the realization that sheer willpower is not enough. The two likely consequences, which I speak from having personally experienced. The one is burnout. And in the Navy, we had a saying that too much hardness makes you soft, which just explains it beautifully. But if another, which I came across, was from Elaine Miller-Carras, who wrote the book From Trauma to Resilience. She describes it being too much or too little for too long. Could be a result of things building up, where eventually you just explode, or even overthinking a traumatic or a super embarrassing event which you perceive to be, and you're continuously replaying the story. And a technique which I share with my clients, which is quite effective, it's called the HALT technique, like HALT, so HALTS. Ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I sad? It's an alert system which can help you bring into balance, because perhaps you are hungry or perhaps you're lonely, and that's where the work, or that's what you need to address. So it's actually a distraction. You address that, and then we can dig a little deeper and see what's actually underlying, what lies beneath that we really need to work on. Or perhaps it could be one of them. But I found that 90% of the time, it's one of those, the health technique. The second consequence from having sheer willpower and it not being enough is that of the zombie effect, whereby you become a semi-dead fish, a robot, literally going through the motions. There's a saying in Afrikaans, I know it's international audience, but in South Africa, Afrikaans, they say to fok voort. So Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Mankind's Search for Meaning, he refers to the blunting of emotions and the feeling that no one could care anymore. And what this is essentially two essential components, be it, of mental toughness, but it's not the only two. And this is emotional control and attention control. And if we didn't have it, we'd be all over the place. You'd be a loose cannon. So they are essential. And having this, you come across as being hardcore, stoic, disassociate from emotion. People tend to admire that because it associates thoughts of being able to withstand pain and, hardcore. But unfortunately, having only this has its consequences. And the Scottish poet, Don Patterson, refers to, he says, don't make the mistake of seeing petrifaction for inner strength. For the walking dead often appear impossibly stoical. They are, which kind of sums it up. And although it's a necessity, you could lose your edge. So it kills curiosity, and curiosity is a gift, because when we're curious, we learn with ease. And it's much life-enhancing to be curious about things, to have a genuine interest. Professor Maddy, you may be familiar with Salvatore Maddy and Cabasa, they were actually the pioneers of mental toughness. Prior to that, in positive psychology, it did not really feature much because you had the influence of Freud and Jung and all the spin-offs. But they were the ones who really wrote academic papers and ensured that it's now in the academic textbooks. And what Maddy said was resilience is not only about surviving the stressful situations, because these situations can actually enhance performance and health. It's a combination of resilience, which is sustainable mental toughness essentially, and strategies. And strategies learning from your lessons, having that vision, and effective goal setting, mental rehearsal, and so forth. It's this combination which leads to the best possible outcomes in uncertain times, which in the military we called VUCA, and I see that now everybody it's become a mainstream term. And for those who don't know, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, where it's beyond unpredictable. So 1969, I'm sure who can tell me what happened in 1969? I'll give you a clue. NASA. Right, it was the first time man landed on the moon, right? So small step for man, giant step for mankind. All right, let's park that now a second. You're familiar with the term, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I've heard that a number of times. In fact, my former career, when I was in the corporate, in banking, I heard that term quite often, meaning that whenever there's a structural shift in the external world, there are opportunities. Usually that people use that for an economic opportunity. There's gaps and there's opportunity of market share and new entrants to the field. So this is essentially what it's saying is that the opportunities lie in the external, right, in a structural shift. And sure, there are numerous examples. In South Africa, we can see examples like that. So we had the urbanization taking place where people moved from the rural into the cities, and we had informal settlements growing. But however, the structure, the economic structure and the whole physical infrastructure was not servicing these informal settlements. They were serving the existing structure because the planning from town planners had never planned for informal settlements, right? So in the 80s, we saw proliferation of taxis, minibus taxis, which cashed in on this. So that's definitely an example which validates that statement, and there are many more. But another example, more contemporary, 30 years later, in the last 10 years, we had the taxis, the car taxis, sedans. The traditional way would be to hail a taxi. But what if you were down some side road? Are you going to stay there all day, night, hailing it, waiting for a taxi to pass? You tell me you'd phone them, sure, but that's not an effective lead generator, because when you're in another country, you're reliant upon somebody at the airport give you a card of a taxi operator or Googling and so forth. So you rely on search optimization and also making sure that you have you first in the queue. But we all have smartphones, or most of us do, right? And in a taxi, the merging of the two created Uber. And there was another example, a contemporary example along the line of transport. So we definitely see that the structural changes results, but not always. Because in 1969, what Professor Garfield, you may be familiar with him, he was on the US Olympic Committee, but also Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was friends with him and actually mentioned him a few times. Because what he revealed was quite remarkable. When he was working at NASA, in 1969, he was at NASA during the moon landing, as the space shuttle was approaching the moon, for the first human beings ever to land on the moon. There were still people looking at their watches saying, is it home time yet? I can't wait for 5 o'clock so I can go to the bar and have a beer. Is it home time yet? I can't wait to get home to watch my episode of my soapy. And he came to a realization that it's not a mind-blowing event that we refer to, but a mind-blowing awakening that needs to happen within. The question is, have you had your awakening? See, often what we fear the most is what protects us the most, the need that we are protecting. An example, when I work with leaders, especially ones who come across as aloof, usually the aloofness, the underlying is that they actually have a fear of rejection, but people are not seeing that, and they rub people up the wrong way, but it's an unintended consequence of this root cause. Another perspective is shadow work, we could call, where the shadow actually hides our innate goodness. And what we actually fear is a life of silence. You see people entering into the singing contest, and some of them can't sing, certainly some can. You think, why put yourself through it? Because we don't want to live a life of insignificance, knowing that our life didn't count for anything. We are forgotten. Nobody wants that. That's what we really fear. And if you've listened to the talk by Volker a few days ago, last week, on Campbell's Hero Journey, there the lesson is that even your shadow, what you're ashamed of, or what what's buried down, is actually a force for good. You have a responsibility to live a better version of your life. Remember, somebody carried you for 9 months and perhaps tried a few times to conceive you, and then there was the growing phase, the early years of your life. There was an investment in you. So there needs to be a return. If you look even from your legacy, your forefathers, you are the result of all your forefathers came behind you. You are that legacy. And if we take it even further to mankind, there are many great people, greater than you and I, who come before us and who've left lessons for us. We're in the age of wisdom. The lessons are all out there. It's never been easier to tap into those lessons and be this better version of ourselves. Now, my belief is that the future is abundant. We've got more opportunities than ever. We may not see it, but they're there. We've got 5G on the horizon, Internet of Things, entrepreneurial opportunities. And as Peter Diamandis talks about, the digitization, which precedes exponential growth, leading to democratization and dematerialization. Sounds like a tongue twister, but just to simplify it, all the encyclopedias and all the textbooks, they can now sit, they can be digitized, and they can now sit on your phone. That's the dematerialization. And they can be shared with anybody. Doesn't matter if you've got, a few degrees, or if you, doesn't matter about social, matters not. That's the democratization. And we are moving towards this age of wisdom. And in the words of Peter Drucker, who's one of the greatest management thinkers, he said that in a few hundred years, when the history of our time is written from a long-term perspective, it is likely that the most important event these historians will see is not the technology, not the internet, not the e-commerce. It is the unprecedented change in the human condition. Because for the first time, literally, a substantial and rapidly growing number of people have choices. For the first time, they will manage themselves, and society is totally unprepared for it. So let's take a step back and understand, this path we find ourselves now. We're in this world of this uncertainty, but how did we get here? And, what's the underpinning principle which runs through the thread. The hunter-gatherer. Now, if you are hunting every day with a bow and arrow, which I mentioned earlier about that sustainable mental toughness to provide for your clan, and somebody from the agrarian, which is the age which followed, the farmer, came to you and said, hey, why don't you become a farmer? Come join us. What would you think? If you realize that this farmer is actually reaping 50 times that what you're reaping, and that's on a good day, some days you barely survive, I'm pretty sure I know what you'd say then. Several generations pass, and we have the industrial age. And here factories are built, specializations are learned, there's delegation, there's scalability, there's raw materials which go through assembly lines, creating higher levels of efficiency. In fact, 50 times that of the agrarian. Now, if you were the agrarian, the farmer, what would you think then? Bear in mind, you'd need new tools, you need new know-how, and you need a capital outlay, but most important, you need a new mindset. And what I'm telling you is not a fancy story or a fairy tale. This really did happen in our existence, and is currently happening before our eyes. The fact is that 90% of these farmers, these agrarians, were downsized. And today, only 3% of the US population are involved in farming. Yet they supply the entire US and much of the world. So those who went to the industrial had to change their mindset. Those who remained also had to change their mindset. What did they do? They took the agrarian, the industrial, and they merged together to create the industrial farm. Then moved to the information age, which is generally regarded as being 89, 90, when Sir Timothy Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web, who I also shared a speaking platform with at the University of Trento at a CRT conference, he founded, and we all got online, the information age, everything, and it never stopped from there. But arguably it started in the mid-1400s with the Gutenberg press, when the Bible started being produced where people could have access to the Bible. Then you had all this proliferation of breakaways because people started interpreting and having their own awakening, so to speak. But let's take it as the internet, because that's what's generally accepted. Moving along in the age of wisdom, we have Google and so forth, where we're actually able to sift through the information. So when I was growing up, when I went to the library, I didn't enjoy going to the library because I have to hunt for the book, and then there's the Dewey system. It was a mission. Now, if you know what to look for, you can find it in this day of wisdom through means. There's various platforms with people you can reach out to. Before, people who were untouchable, so to speak, you can now PM them, personal message them. You've got access. It's all out there. You can find your guru. But in the industrial age, you had machine and you had people. People were, and machine, they were both things. You come to work for me, your job is to push that button over there the whole day. Understood? So all I was interested in is your body. Not your mind, not your heart, not your spirit, not at all. Just push that button. And unfortunately, much of our mindset and our management practices today are still from the industrial age. This is that shift that needs to happen. But in this day of wisdom where we find ourselves, it's never been easier to find that inner power and find that warrior within, evoke that warrior within. But it's not without consequences. See, all organizations, be it political organizations or company organizations, all organizations have their own culture, have their own biases. And it may be that once you find your truth, it may not resonate and it may go against the grain of your current status quo, the current infrastructure that you're with. And your truth may differ. The bottom line is you may get a slap in the face. The question is, are you ready for that slap? In my work revolves a lot around the shadow work, looking within and finding that within that dark shadow, there's golden nuggets that actually radiate, and to change that story and to change the perspective and to understand, give things context and meaning and tap into it and see that you actually have this golden shadow within you. And on this journey, you may find this resistance. You may encounter this resistance likely, regardless of what your center is, whether it's the proverbial left or right, but it's only when you have this solid, monolithic center that you can stand in your truth, and you have to ask yourself, what is my center? And often people say, It's all about passion. I've got to do what I'm passionate. I don't enjoy, whatever, number crunching all day. I've got to do what I'm really passionate about. But that's not the entire answer. And, it's part of the answer. Certainly with passion, it's easier to get out of a warm bed into a cold morning. Certainly it does help. But Zaleznik talks about twice-born leaders. Once you're born, and the second birth is when you go through major career disappointment. It's in that pain that you see what's priority. Everywhere you go, somebody wants your attention. You get emails nonstop. There's information bombarding you, and often it's difficult to prioritize because you think, oh, this is important, that's important. But in that period of pain, suddenly you have this razor waist when you say, stop. That. And that's what it refers to. And the question is, have you achieved? And this is what I ask my clients. Have you achieved? The answer is yes, I've achieved. And look at my latest car and look at my certificates. I say, sure. But apart from those successes, what is your legacy? What did you give to the world? What are you really proud of? And do you feel that you've got enough now? Are you fulfilled? And that's the identity crisis of this mind-blowing awakening I mentioned earlier, where it's a realization that the drive needs to be from within and not an external reference point where we sort of blindly get forced into. And this is about finding that truth, because finding that truth and succeeding in your truth inspires others. The clients, when I hear that, I have everything, but I still want more. This is usually a good sign for me because I realize that they're having a mind-blowing awakening. So the work doesn't, less work needs to take place in the shadow, so to speak, because their awareness is already being raised themselves. And if you watch The Matrix, it's the red pill. It's this unpleasant truth where up until that point, we've been taking the blue pill of blissful ignorance. But we need to be willing to look at the other side, to breach our confirmation bias and override this bias. Where, in NLP, we refer to neuro-linguistic programming. There's a concept of the RAS, reticular activating system, where we look for the evidence. An example, so we bias and we find evidence. You say, look, you see, I can prove it because we switched on to that. And the classic example which people use to explain this is, if you just bought a red Toyota, when you drive, you'll start spotting red Toyotas, but they've always been there, but now your RAS is activated. The example that works for me, that really does work for me, it's not the red Toyota one, but it's when I travel, I can hear South African accents. Even if they're on the other side of the room, I'll hear that because I'm switched onto that. And even if somebody's wearing a South African sports top, on the other side of a shopping mall, wherever I am, I'll ping it, I'll spot it, because that's what I'm switched on for. So, researchers found that 95%, up to 95% of our thoughts is the same every day. So, which ties in with this confirmation bias. Well, that assuming you're not having mind-blowing events every day. But each day does not need to be the same. The predominance of genetics has been disproven time and time again. Genes do not determine our lives in an absolute way. We know that if you take the nucleus of a cell, which is considered the brain, if you kill that, the cell continues to live. But if there's an external shock or the membrane is damaged from an external response, the cell could die. This is called an epigenetic response. So we are impacted by the external ourselves. The saying, you are what you eat, we've all heard that, especially from our friends who will go on a health binge, on a health diet, doing shakes. But I'll take that further. We are what we consume. And it's not only through our mouth, but also through our ears, our nose, and all the five senses, including our thought process. So effectively, we are what we consume. But we have this internal bias, right? So let's modify that even further, saying we are selective consumers. Or to put it another way, we are addicts linked to a root cause, where we are obsessively moving towards something and having this subconscious patterning, a habit, this response to a need being met. But we need to breach this bias, because this need being met results in triggers. and then we sort of blame somebody for triggering us. And it may be a genuine trigger, but a lot of the time it's our receptors, because of our internal bias or because of the work we need to do within ourselves, that are saying, give me, give me. And whether this person triggered you or not, sooner or later you're going to be triggered. So the technique which I mentioned earlier is about the Holtz technique as a step to raise that awareness and being in tune. And then thereafter going deeper into the work that needs to take place. Another thing I'm often asked is, isn't it about love? Because growing up, I wasn't really loved. I had issues with my parents. Or I came from a broken home, whatever. And I feel that if I just have love and if I find the right partner who loves me for who I am, everything will be fine. So, right, that's part of it, definitely. There's even a song by the Beatles, All We Need Is Love. But if you look at all these acts of violence, domestic violence in the name of love, and the woman who doesn't want to leave the man because she says he still loves me, and the man who says, I promise I won't do it again, I love you, or manipulation, show me that you really love me. There's many examples. So love is certainly part of the answer, but it's not the only answer. There's no way around it. The answer lies within. And if you don't evoke your warrior within, what's going to be in 5 years' time, 10? Your normal may not be the normal of the person beside you or the next person's normal. You need to examine whether your normal is just a normalization of an incredibly dysfunctional system. So what I've covered here is, this is a model, a coaching model based on the pillars of mental toughness, which I work with a lot with the military. And what I've covered is self, the S, the part of the self. Then there's the result, which is the R, what's your desired results, and then that path along the R to the result. Now, the E and the A is the emotional control and attention control. Those two critical components I mentioned earlier. If you have only those two, then it's blunting of the emotion, which you don't want. You don't want to be a robot. It's necessary to contain your emotions, but need to keep on in check. And the past tense of spear is to speared. And the D is for downtime habits. So that's effectively, what are you doing in your spare time? Does it jeopardize your mission? People say to me, well, I need to switch off. I just need to go blank. Sure, but there's a difference between going off the rails and having a detour and putting yourself in jeopardy, then recharging the battery. It is a big difference. So what do you do when no one's watching? The more you can correlate the two, the better. And still having your me time, absolutely. And it's creating that habit of excellence, which, the 3 Ds, the drive or the desire, discipline, and determination, and living according to that. So a little bit about the R. There's a fantastic book, start with the why, and let's say, what is your why? And I admire that, but often I find that people get sucked into that too much, and they're spending a lot of time contemplating kind of what is their why, whereby it's about that action, taking action. What I would often put forward as an option to people, let them decide, is just taking time to find out your core values and finding that purpose for the core value. When I speak to people, so waiters or so forth, who are studying part-time and they're working to pay their studies, I admire that. They wake up in the morning with that purpose. And I ask them, do you know your why? And they don't. I said, well, I don't know. I just want to finish studying and then I'm going to work it out. And I think to myself, that is a pragmatic approach. Rather than being a nutty professor, Einstein with the hair all over the place, mixing potions, saying, what is my why? Spending years contemplating on top of a hilltop, meditating, by taking action. And you have a purpose, and you wake up in the morning, you've got a purpose, and continue doing the inner work. And with time, because finding a why could take a week or could take years, but the important thing is to take action. And that purpose, with time, becomes a higher purpose, so it evolves. And if you follow Michael Gerber, he talks about when you're not working in your job, you're working at your job. So this is the importance of your downtime habits. And you may have heard McRaven, Admiral US Navy, who wrote the book Make Your Own Bed, says when no one's watching, imagine you're living at home. This is one of the examples he put. If you're living at home and alone, and you leave. Now, if you don't make your bed, no one's going to know. If you don't do the dishes, no one's going to know. And I've got nothing against that. But if you have a terrible day out there in the world, terrible day, and you come home, is your day going to be enhanced? Coming home to an unmade bed and dishes everywhere. But if you've made your bed and you've cleaned up before you leave, you come back, you've had a terrible day, guess what? You get to start all over again. Clean slate. You get to charge that mind, get in the right mindset. And when you leave the door to show your face to the world, it's a clean slate. You show up. And you show up with total commitment. And total commitment, I've heard many examples, but this is a word we use often in the military. And I hear people saying, you've got to be 110%, 120%. Well, the maximum you can give is 100. You don't get 110% unless there's a bonus here and there, which in itself is an anomaly. So let's start with 100%. But even then, you don't want to live 100% continuously, because you've got a car which goes 160 kilometers an hour. Do you drive 160 kilometers an hour all the time? You're going to burn out. You want to be operating at 60, 70%. And when need be, when times, commit yourself at any time, not only in tough times. When the tough times, you need to have the ability to go to 100% to surpass that, while still maintaining check-ins with yourself so that you don't burn out, with mental well-being check-ins and physical well-being, but also in alignment with your core values. So if I had to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning, not saying that I will, but if I had to, you should still tell me the same. Yes, this is what I want. If I gave you 4 tequilas, the answer should still be the same, because you are in alignment. But also anytime, including your downtime. So this is what I was talking about, the downtime, this total commitment. And it goes also a lot about, morning routines. People say to me, I prefer doing exercise in the evening. Is it all right if I do, whatever works for you? But for me, the morning it works because of the mindset. And, 2 main reasons what I tell myself. When I'm sleeping, it's my parasympathetic nervous system, that the rest and digest, which is emotion, right? So to go to sleep, you need to wind down. But when you're awake, it's the sympathetic, which, need also to have the fight and flight to kick in. So the two are polar diverse, polar opposites. So the switch is not through, tons of coffee, but a morning routine can help you do that switch in a healthy way. But a second reason, more spiritual explanation, is you may have heard of Desjardins, right? The Jesuit Catholic priest. When said this earthly body of ours, we've only had it for the number of years we've been on, your age. So this is not natural to us. So when we do our morning routine, it actually grounds us to Mother Earth, because we are from another realm, right? If you want to call it spiritual realm or whatever. But and he said that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So those two sit well. That is why morning routines work for me, but it's whatever works for you, whatever your truth is. The important thing is to internalize and take action, and you will know. If you're interested in what I've said and would like to know more, the one option is to send me an email. There's the website at the bottom, where the pillars that I've shared with you are going into depth, and that's a book that will be launched in Q4 of this year. And you can also see the website, warriortrainingcenter.com. You can also reach out if you'd like to do training, Krav Maga, we have a gym, but if you're interested in finding out leadership, mental toughness, you're more than welcome to connect. Kobus has also asked me to put together something for this, specifically for this talk, and this is what the offer is. It's a 21-day action plan. So 3 days is laying the foundation, 3 60-minute live sessions. Then there's accountability, which is the midpoint of the 21 days. And then there's a wrap-up. And included in this is the discount on the hard copy. It's 40%, almost half off. And also a live Q&A with an international speaker and performance coach, whose credentials will be presented before the time. So you could also do your research and ask him or her any questions you want. And for this, offer, it's reduced to $47 $7, and that's all included. You've got the details there. At this point, I'll hand over to Kobus in case there are any questions.
Hello. Yes. One question is the answer of love more so the act of taking responsibility for love by achieving self-love first?
Was that your question or from the floor?
It was from the floor, Sonia.
Okay, Sonia. Sonia, yeah, that's a beautiful question. Definitely, it's about owning, ownership, owning your shadow, owning your story. But going actually one step further is owning what Carl Jung refers to this collective unconscious. So if you were a descendant of nobility, or if you were a descendant of a commoner, so to speak, regardless, you own. So you own your heritage. You're not ashamed. And I'm not saying being proud. I'm saying own it. So it's you, because there's only one unique you in this whole universe, right? So it's about that ownership, and that ownership comes with that self-worth, that there is only you, and this is me. I was created like this. This is my earthly body that's been assigned to me. So I'm going to embrace this. And so it's on those fronts, definitely.
Okay, great stuff. Anyone with a question before we close this talk? We have 1 or 2 minutes left. Sonia's typing. Is there anyone else that would love to also ask a question? I can also open your mic if needed. Sonia says, great, thanks, Claudio. Okay, so Claudia, looks like there's no other questions. Okay, I see Santal is typing. Thank you very much for your time and sharing. I learned a lot this morning, and I think you should do this more. You have the skill and you have a lot of knowledge to share. So I'm looking forward to having you host another one soon, and I will be there to support you. And let me just say, Santal says it was amazing. Santal asks, is the $47 for all 5 live sessions and book?
Yes, it's all the sessions and 40% off the book when it's launched.
I think Claudia's presentation was really clear. Thank you. Great value from Sonia. Okay, now I see Mr. Giancarlo is typing. I just want to see what Mr. Giancarlo is want to say. He says, thank you, Claudio. Claudio, well done. Great presentation. A lot to digest, definitely. I just want to say, everyone, thank you. The replays will be up this evening, so be on the lookout for them. Thank you for your support. And Claudio, well done. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you to everybody who's joined. And although I couldn't see all of you, I feel that you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you, Kobus, for inviting me.
Okay. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.